So most people that have anxiety, they would probably use the term, I suffer from high functioning anxiety, or I suffer from generalized anxiety disorder. I don't look at it that way. I don't perceive it that way, because the way that I look at it is there's nothing in this world that's going to get the better of me. I will find a way to overcome. With that being said, at a very early age, I recognized that I had some sort of generalized anxiety disorder. As I've gotten older, I like to term it as high functioning anxiety. So what is high functioning anxiety exactly? The way that I would kind of look at it or describe it is basically excessively worrying, focusing on past mistakes and letting past mistakes overwhelm you or overanalyzing them. When you find yourself in an anxiety-induced situation, perhaps having to speak in front of a large audience, your heart starts racing, your mind lacks focus, and it becomes very challenging to do it. Insomnia is definitely a symptom of high functioning anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder. So this is the way that I would describe it, and these are some of the symptoms that I felt as I was growing up, and as a younger person didn't really recognize exactly what was going on inside of me. In fact, I just thought that this was normal and that feeling this way was kind of exactly how one is supposed to feel. It's not that I thought everyone else was feeling this way, but I just figured this is how I am, and I'm gonna deal with it and just kind of work through it. Other symptoms of high functioning anxiety might include fatigue. When you're not sleeping correctly because you're anxious and your mind is racing and you have a challenging kind of night's sleep, the next day you're fatigued. You're kind of going through your day in a challenged position. For myself, I kind of figured out a way to just push through, but high functioning anxious people oftentimes have fatigue. So another major symptom is the fear of failure. And this is why I believe I have high functioning anxiety versus just like a generalized anxiety disorder, because I'm driven to success and I have an internal fear of failure and the idea of failure. Though failure is a good thing in many respects because you learn from it, the fear of it at times for a high functioning anxious person can be overwhelming and could kind of dominate your thoughts at times. So how did I know that I had high functioning anxiety or even a generalized anxiety? As far back as I can remember, I would always kind of let my thoughts get the better of me. I could even remember as a young child, embarrassingly, that I would be laying in bed at night and I would be thinking in my head, am I breathing? Is my body breathing? I would literally be fearing in my head whether or not I was breathing correctly and getting enough oxygen, and excessively worrying about that as like a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old. I will never forget that feeling or that thought, because it was such an odd moment in my life that it's kind of forever kind of embedded in my thought process. Having to perform in front of large audiences, like for example, if I had to give a little speech or even get up in front of the class in just like a classroom of 20 or 30 young kids, just being almost overwhelmed with like a racing heart and, a racing mind, and, my body would start to kind of sweat a little bit. One of the things that I had going for me is that I was an athlete. So I was constantly expending physical energy, which I think helped me overcome the high functioning anxious moments, because my body, the endorphins that are produced when you're working out or running or playing a sport, kind of helped balance out that anxiety. But there were so many moments as a young person, even as I got older and I entered the workforce, there was many instances in my professional life where I had to speak in front of audiences or all eyes were on me. And when I tell you, the feeling of anxiousness was unbelievably overwhelming. And as I got older, I started to recognize exactly what was going on in me. But previous to start to really kind of put my mind to it, I just thought that this was normal behavior, or that just was like a normal thought process for any human being. And that maybe I just kind of was a little bit different than others. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I started to really kind of think about it and say, like, this can't possibly be a normal feeling that's going on inside of me. So an example of how I started to recognize that I had this, as I got older, if I had to give a presentation the next day, and I knew that there would be an audience of maybe 15 or 20 people, I literally would spend the entire night excessively worrying about the presentation, about wanting to be excellent at it. And again, this is why I feel like I have high functioning anxiety, because the worry and the excessively thinking about it centered upon wanting to be excellent and wanting to be prepared and wanting to, be the best or have the best possible outcome with the presentation that I was about to deliver. And I would literally spend the entire night thinking about it, overanalyzing it, and being overwhelmed by it. And I would wake up the next day, if I slept at all, fatigued, and then I would go to the speech or I would go to the presentation and I would nail it. I would absolutely nail it, but I would have exhausted myself thinking about wanting to be great and wanting to be excellent at it. So that's a good example with regard to when I got older, how it affected my life. So how did I deal with my kind of high functioning anxiety or my generalized anxiety on a day-to-day basis? So I would say that my upbringing and the parenting that I had was really the main factor in me dealing with this kind of everyday challenge. I grew up in a very strict household. I'm the youngest of 7 children, through my mother remarrying and my stepfather having 5 kids of his own, and we had kind of this modern blended family. And in that modern blended family, toughness and perseverance were always kind of something that we kind of operated by and that we were taught. There was really no room for kind of feeling sorry for yourself. There was no room for, curling up in a little ball and saying, life has gotten the better of me. So this parenting that I had from a very young age was just, you're gonna find a way to get the job done. You're gonna find a way to win, and you're not gonna make any excuses. And I'm so pleased and I'm so glad and happy that I had that type of upbringing, because frankly, for the first 40-something years of my life, I drew upon that parenting that I was provided to overcome this challenge. And that's why I say it's not really a challenge for me, because I will find a way to overcome. And I did my entire life. And the way that I overcame it was being brought up in a household where toughness, perseverance, this idea that you never feel sorry for yourself, you don't expect anyone else to do it, you do it on your own. You get the job done, you find a way to win. And I took that with me my entire life, and I'm ever so grateful to my parents for giving me that kind of mentality that has always been embedded in my soul. So how did high functioning anxiety affect owning a business? So as you might have seen from some other videos, in late 2015, early 2016, I started a business. And though I always knew I had this anxiety inside of me, I never officially diagnosed it, so to speak. I just knew that this is how I was made up and that I was a high functioning, anxious human being. But when I started a business, just the everyday trials and tribulations of business ownership exacerbated my anxiety, and frankly, it pushed me in a way that I never had to push myself. Anyone who's ever owned a business knows that there is just a general fear that comes with owning that business. There is no rest from it. You go to sleep at night knowing that many people rely upon you, that your success or failure is dependent upon your skill set, how good you could do it. And imagine going through that process with just a general anxiety or high functioning anxiety. It is and was one of the most challenging things I've ever faced in my life. It affected how I did business and how I conducted business There were so many days that I had sleeplessness, but had to wake up and perform and win at business and drive business results, or else my family wouldn't have a successful life, or we wouldn't have the things that we all need, and I wouldn't be able to give my children the best possible life, or my wife the best possible life. So imagine having that type of responsibility on you while you're feeling a tremendous sense of anxiety because business ownership, there's no, you go to work from 9 to 5 and you're working for a corporation and you get a paycheck every 2 weeks. It's either you win or you lose because of what you do. And the paycheck comes or it doesn't come because of what you do. So being a high functioning anxious person in many respects drove me through my fatigue, through my sleeplessness, through the challenges. And in many respects, I'm glad that I had it, but my goodness, it was exacerbated in ways that I couldn't even begin to tell you. Previous to owning a business, I knew it was always there, but I had this understanding that, I have safety in my job. With business ownership, there's no safety. There is no safety. You either win or you lose because of what you do on the day-to-day basis. So another way in which I really knew that I was challenged with this high-functioning anxiety or this generalized anxiety was that in my professional life, when I came out of business school, I actually worked in pharmaceuticals and I sold a medication that was indicated for generalized anxiety disorder. So what's interesting is that though I sold one of these medications, I still was too stubborn to really kind of identify it within myself. And it really kind of was, me overcoming like this idea in my mind that I had this, and kind of admitting that I had this, but I had spent at least 10 years being fully educated and being able to convey exactly what these types of medications do to physicians and exactly what the symptomology is. However, inside of myself, I had a hard time to even admit that this was going on inside of me. In fact, I was all about perseverance because of that upbringing that I had, because of the parenting that I had. I was all about just simply overcoming whatever challenges I faced. But it kind of goes back to like this stubbornness that I have and this ability to function to a high level despite what's going on inside of me. I had this generalized anxiety disorder and I was able to overcome it for 40 plus years without really kind of stating in my own mind that I have it. So what are the things that I've done to overcome this kind of challenge, this everyday challenge? What are some of the things that I've done? First and foremost, I now admit and know and understand internally that this is something that I am challenged with on a day-to-day basis. And you know what? I'm fine with it because I'm going to find a way to win no matter what. But anyone who's suffering from this can definitely do things that are going to mitigate, these anxious feelings and going to mitigate the symptomology of it all. First and foremost, I exercise. Without question, I know that for the rest of my life, and I'm absolutely fine with it because I very much enjoy it, I will have to exercise. There's something about exercising that changes kind of, the chemical balance in my brain, that the moment I'm exercising, the endorphins start going, and I'm sure there's some science behind it, but the endorphins start going and the negative energy starts to dissipate. And without question, it is something that I need and enjoy, and that severely mitigates the anxiety that I feel. Secondly, I know that I have to live a healthy lifestyle. So many people that are suffering from like a depression or an anxiety, what do? They self-medicate with alcohol, they self-medicate with drugs, they eat terribly. Why? Because when you're not feeling right, what do? You want to go eat a cheeseburger, you want to drink a beer, you want to take these feelings away that you're having and give yourself a temporary good feeling. Those temporary good feelings are not remotely going to help you, because at the end of the day, you're making yourself unhealthy. So I know that I must live a healthy lifestyle, because that healthy lifestyle physically absolutely translates to a mental happiness for me. So I eat healthy. I lessen my alcohol intake. That's not to say that I'm not social and I'll have a drink here and there in a social situation, but I know that I really must lessen the alcohol intake, because it's a temporary feeling of goodness, whereas I need to have a holistic feeling of goodness. Sleep. I make sure that I have a routine that I stick to on an every night basis. It's almost like Pavlov's dog, if anyone knows the history of Pavlov's dog, where you do the same type of thing every day, so your body gets used to, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep at a certain time at nighttime, and my body just kind of falls to sleep in a natural sense. Whereas if I have an off-putting schedule or a fragmented schedule, it will take my mind away from the normal things that I'm used to. Additionally, electronics. I do my best to keep away from electronics at nighttime. I know you might have heard all these things, but the electronics at nighttime, the blue light or whatever it is, it stimulates and activates the mind. So I do my best to put myself in a position to not have an activation in the nighttime. But, putting yourself in a routine, eating well, exercising, understanding what's going on inside of me as opposed to kind of denying it. These are all things that I've done to control the anxiety that I have felt in my adult life. I'm very open about, what I've experienced in my life with high functioning anxiety. And I have no problem telling people that this is something that I've been challenged with at times, and that I almost look at it as something that has driven me to success. And if I were to answer the question, can you be successful while being challenged with high functioning anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder? And unequivocally, I will say yes. Yes, you can. I've had a wonderful professional life where I've always kind of risen through the ranks and have had lofty positions. I've opened and been successful with multiple businesses, as you might have seen in other videos. I have a wonderful family with a beautiful wife, a successful, beautiful wife, a successful marriage, loving children. I consider myself a great husband and a great father. I've had athletic successes through my life. The point is many hundreds of thousands of Americans and hundreds of thousands of people across the globe suffer from generalized anxiety disorder or even high functioning anxiety. You can absolutely be successful, but what I would say is take responsibility. It's not up to someone else to take responsibility for your feelings, for your thoughts, for overcoming the challenges that you feel in your life. It's up to you, and you absolutely can do it. Study it, learn it, understand the things that you need to do to overcome it, and you absolutely can overcome it. Winners are gonna find a way to win. We all have something. There's a skeleton in everyone's closet. There's a diagnosis in everyone's life. You know what I mean? You can find a way to win despite any challenge that you ever faced in your life. And I hope that me sharing this challenge that I've had maybe potentially helps you.